in the context of supporting workers, supporting the people across this country who are indeed engaging it right now in many respects in saying no and striking and deciding that they're not going to participate. I'd say a lot of that has to do, unfortunately, with the mandates that have been impressed upon workers by the efforts of the President of the United States, President Biden, and an illegal and unconstitutional requirement that employers vaccinate their workers, or those workers might be forced to lose their job. Well, this has very real consequences. We have seen thousands of workers across this country protesting, police members walking out, firefighters walking out, teachers walking out, people in industries and airlines and places across the country walking out, nurses who were serving this country on the front lines during the pandemic last year when we didn't know all that was going on, and now they're being forced to decide to quit because of an unconscionable, illegal, unnecessary, unconstitutional mandate by the President of the United States. The government is forcing its citizens to make these tough choices. I have a friend of mine, a dear friend, who lives in Alabama. And she said to me, I had a long talk with a doctor, and he is not anti-vax by any stretch. He's had this vaccine. But he's concerned, and I'm concerned. This is my friend, I've been a decade plus living with multiple sclerosis. And I'm not in any way anxious to provoke an immune response by getting the vaccination. But now she's being forced to decide whether or not she can continue to teach. She just wants to teach. And now the university for which she works is saying, you must get vaccinated or you're going to lose your job. Now you say, well, just go seek an accommodation. Well, listen what the geniuses at the university at which she works sent out as their accommodation. To be eligible for possible exception, you must first establish that your refusal to be vaccinated is based upon a sincere belief that it is religious in nature. A refusal to be vaccinated does not qualify for an exception if it is based upon personal preference, concerns about the possible effects of the vaccine. I want to pause for a second. Concerns about the possible effects of the vaccine does not qualify for an exception. Yet my friend, who may now seek a religious exception because she has religious concerns about it, but she also has very real concerns as an MS survivor, someone dealing and living with MS. She's having to make a call about what's in her interest. Mother of 3 children. 2 of her children have had issues and reactions arguably attached to different vaccinations in the past. And never before in the history of the United States of America has the federal government gone out and issued an edict from Washington demanding that the American people get vaccinated. Think about that. Never before in our history. It hasn't happened. Yes, it can happen in our military, although we should be careful about it. Nobody should get dishonorably discharged. Nobody should get discharged. It's happened at places where the federal government has a direct impact on the employment of an individual. But all of these decisions have been left to local and state governments, local schools, local hospitals. But no, President Biden in his infinite wisdom, such as that may be, has suggested now by mandate that everybody get vaccinated. And every business must vaccinate their employees. The fact of the matter is, we are now almost 600 days into the 15 days to slow the spread. The government lying to its citizens, continuing to move the goalposts of normalcy, moving further away. Now the president wants a 97% vaccination rate, which he completely made up and pulled out of air, which is pretty much the definition of his entire incompetent, absurd presidency. The government of this country derives its just powers from the governed. The government of this country derives its power from the consent of the governed. And thankfully, brave Americans across this country are standing up every day and telling this president to pound sand. They happen to be using a different colloquialism. Southwest Airlines. Pilots spoke out and they just scrapped a plan to put unvaccinated employees out of work. In-N-Out Burger. Quote, we refuse to become the vaccination police for any government. God bless them. Go get an In-N-Out Burger. General Electric employees in Greenville, South Carolina walk out over a vaccine mandate. A New York hospital will stop delivering babies as workers quit over a vaccine mandate. 1,900 Washington State employees quit, fired over a vaccine mandate. Trooper tells Governor Inslee in Washington to kiss my fill in the blank in final sign-off before vaccine mandate. Seattle first responders. Parents in California protest student vaccine mandates. Vaccine opponents protest outside Stormont Vale following hospital's shot requirement. And a Wyoming teenager arrested after refusing to wear a mask on school grounds, family says. Well, God bless these individuals across this country who are telling this president to pound sand and telling any governor or any member of the government in their state or local community exercising tyranny over their freedom as Americans to make the choices that they think is correct in their lives to pound sand. But why are we in this position, Madam Speaker, as I sit here with raptured attention from all of the members of Congress who are in here having a robust debate about the future of our country, as opposed to being out, say, having steak dinners with whoever the heck they're having dinners with in this town? Why are we in this position? Why are we here? Last week, we discovered with very clear terms that Dr. Fauci misled Americans during questioning from Rand Paul in 2 different Help Committee hearings. Dr. Fauci said on May 11, 2021, quote, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect, speaking to Dr. Paul, that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And later, quote, I will repeat again, the NIH and the NIAID categorically has not funded gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. In the July 11, 2021 hearing, Fauci said, Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you were referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. But what do we now know? We know that NIH did in fact fund gain of function research at the Wuhan lab. EcoHealth Alliance manipulated a coronavirus to generate up to 10,000 times the viral load, violating provisions of its National Institutes of Health contract that forbade unregulated research that could make a disease significantly more dangerous or transmissible. That quote was in the right-wing conspiracy media paper Roll Call. My Republican colleagues in the Oversight Committee received a letter from NIH that confirmed that EcoHealth Alliance, which received money from NIAID, violated the terms of their NIH grant because they made the virus more deadly to humanized mice. In a September letter to me, Dr. Fauci said that because the research at Wuhan was not anticipated to be gain of function, it was approved. But why, then, did the Defense Advanced Research Projects agencies, known in this town as DARPA, reject similar research due to gain of function concerns? The NIH had a definition of gain of function on its webpage, which was available as recently as October 19th, just a couple of days ago. It has now been changed entirely. Why would it be changed? Why would the NIH change their gain of function web pages this week? Could it be that Dr. Fauci was caught last week in his exchange by Dr. Rand Paul, my friend, and the senator? Now, they don't even say gain of function research on the website. They took it off. It now says EPPP research. Now it says, instead of the term gain of function research describes a type of research that modifies a biological agent so that it confers a new or enhanced activity of that agent, it now says on limited occasions when justified by compelling public health need and conducted in very high biosecurity laboratories, NIH has supported certain research that may be reasonably anticipated to create transfer or use. Come on. You want to know why the American people don't believe their government? They shouldn't. They shouldn't, Madam Speaker. They shouldn't believe the lies that are coming out of our national health leaders that are endangering the American people, as Dr. Fauci's lies have been doing for the better part of 18 months. Why trust an NIH that is, by definition, not being truthful? Even if Dr. Fauci wants to hide behind the technicalities of the definitions of gain of function, why couldn't he, with an ounce of humility, even an ounce of humility, go before the Senate committee and say, you know what, Senator Paul, I am troubled by how much funding has been going into these research efforts at the Wuhan Institute. You know what, Dr. Paul, I've got concerns because I didn't know for sure what EcoHealth Alliance was doing. But here's the problem with that. An NIH spokesperson told Vanity Fair that Dr. Fauci was, quote, entirely truthful in his statements to Congress. Oh, thank you, NIH spokesperson. And that he did not have the progress report that detailed the controversial research at the time he testified in July. Okay, pause. At this point, I would at least expect the good Dr. Fauci to have the humility to say, hey, this is troubling. I don't know that our research led to COVID-19, but I know that we've been funding now, we've been funding research that is in the zip code of gain of function. DARPA wouldn't even do it. The arrogance of this guy is that he's never going to admit that. He doesn't want to admit that he's wrong. He doesn't want to admit that NIH is neck deep in this stuff. Because it's just straight up arrogance, and that's why the American people have had it, and they don't believe him. And they don't believe NIH. But it goes on further. EcoHealth Alliance appeared to contradict that claim and said in a statement, quote, these data were reported as soon as we were made aware in our year 4 report in April of 2018. Now let me be clear, as a former federal prosecutor, I don't know the facts. I don't know if EcoHealth presented that data in 2018. We'll look into it. That's my job here. But I can promise you one thing. My Democratic colleagues on the other side of the aisle aren't going to look into it because they don't care. Because this has never been about health. This has never been about the truth. This has always been about power. Well, rather than just focusing on the NIH, why don't we take a minute to focus on the CDC? Another one of these august national health organizations to which we're supposed to bow down and say, please tell me what I must do for my own health and the well-being of my family. After facing backlash for saying the federal government was looking into a vaccine mandate, the CDC director, Walensky, took to Twitter to say there would be no federal vaccine mandate on July 30th, 2021. I guess President Biden didn't get the memo? Oh, it's not a federal vaccine mandate. I'm just saying to businesses or you're a contractor with the federal government, you must do it if you have over 100 employees. Well, tell all that to my friends and the people around this country that right now are facing the decision of giving up their livelihood and not having a paycheck because they want to make the best decision for themselves or their families. My friend with MS who doesn't want to get a jab, wants to teach, is being said she cannot. Because President Biden and the federal government is holding federal contracts over the head of a state university, which is too gutless and cowardly to tell the federal government to pound sand. That state, a southern state, should be absolutely ashamed of itself. That state should be telling the federal government to go straight to you-know-where. The CDC takes an absurd all-or-nothing approach to the vaccine. For example, if a teenager recovers from a COVID-19 infection and is immune, and this teenager receives one vaccine causing hospitalization for myocarditis, the CDC suggests getting a second dose of the vaccine once the heart has recovered. You know what? The CDC director can go straight to hell. If that's my son or daughter, no way. No way. And the CDC should be ashamed of itself for doing this. absolutely ashamed of itself. And go talk to the parents of those who have died. Go talk to the families of the moms that aren't here. I'm not sitting here suggesting that I know in my infinite wisdom what is best for every American in terms of getting a shot. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But what I am is a congressman and a representative who swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States that I would stand up to secure the blessings of liberty so that every American can make the decision for him or herself as to whether or not they take any medicine. Again, never in the history of the United States have we had a federal mandate from a president who doesn't frankly know east from west come down here and tell us that we've got to take a shot. The CDC refuses to talk about natural immunity. Why? Why will the CDC not talk about natural immunity? In fact, they point to an inconclusive study that prompted the director to say, quote, if you have had COVID-19 before, please still get vaccinated. There are at least 89 studies that affirm natural immunity is effective and long-lasting from a prior infection, yet our public health experts are uninterested. I have to go to studies in Israel. I have to go look at studies in the United Kingdom in order to get facts about natural immunity. Now, why would that be? Surely it's not because anybody's self-interested or financially interested in how much these pharmaceutical companies are making throwing vaccines at every American. A UK Office for National Statistics report published Monday found those who catch the Delta variant are around 71% less likely to test positive again, 4 points higher than double vaccinated individuals. I'm not saying you want to go catch the virus, but if you've had the virus, you may not want to get the vaccine. And yet our scientists who we now know to be less than truthful, refuse to acknowledge the benefits of natural immunity. Now, what about the FDA? Can we trust the FDA? The FDA still has an image of a horse tagged with a web page saying why you should not use ivermectin to treat or prevent COVID-19. Doctors have been denied ivermectin and have not been able to get access to this treatment, which has proven effective, at least to some, in treating COVID. Again, what happened to right to try? What happened to the ability to go to the doctor of your choice? Dr. Pierre Corey conducted analysis of randomized controlled treatment trials of ivermectin used against COVID and found statistically significant reductions in mortality. Our FDA and CDC are preventing patients from receiving ivermectin. Now, I got a prescription for ivermectin. So did my wife. We each went to go get it filled. And it's not horse medicine. I didn't roll down to Tractor Supply, which I go to often, to go get supplies for the land on which I live. And yes, I've seen the ivermectin in the cabinet at Tractor Supply. No, this was a prescription for pills of ivermectin that we wanted to have on supply in case we thought we needed it. So we go down to get it filled at a pharmacy, CVS, and the first time my wife went down there, they whispered in the back. They said, "Oh, we can't do that. We can't fill that prescription." Oh, well, finally one person came in and overrode and said, "Look, do they have a prescription?" "Okay, yeah. Well, then go ahead and fill it." So they filled the prescription. Then I go down to get the prescription filled that I got a few weeks later. They wouldn't fill it. Went to another pharmaceutical company, another pharmacy I should say. They wouldn't fill it. Finally went to a third one and we got it filled. Why is that? Why is that? The FDA has delayed Merck's COVID-19 pill likely until 2022. Now, some of my research has shown people out there questioning why we need the Merck pill, and maybe this is just another way to have another pharmaceutical company make a bunch of money on the back of COVID. But I also have a lot of smart doctors that are talking about the Merck pill as a potentially highly beneficial pill. Well, why can't we just all agree to right to try? We're in the middle of a pandemic where people are getting sick. And individuals can't go try this medicine because we're waiting on the FDA and all of its genius to go through every possible scenario despite very positive returns on the initial tests. Molnupiravir was so effective in its phase 3 randomized controlled trial that researchers stopped accepting new participants. No COVID patient who received the drug died, compared with 8 deaths in the placebo group. When a drug shows to work this well, it's considered unethical to continue to give sick subjects a placebo. The government has even pre-purchased 1.7 million treatment courses. The medication doesn't even require refrigeration. It's easy to ship. Yet practicing physicians right now with patients who might die can't give this drug to any sick patient because of regulatory barriers. So we have mandates that you do stuff that may not even help in the slightest bit and may in fact hurt you, mandates, and we have regulatory barriers preventing you from being able to figure out how to go take care of yourselves or your loved ones. Again, I'm not saying whether I think that drug is particularly efficacious or not. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But what I am is someone who can read, and what I am is someone who believes in freedom, and what I am is someone who believes you should be able to go to the doctor of your choice, make a decision for you and your family with the best information available and a right to try. What about HHS as a whole? Can we trust HHS? After watching all the debacle that has been NIH and Dr. Fauci and gain-of-function research, after watching what we've seen with the CDC and refusal to look at natural immunity, after looking at what we've seen with respect to the FDA and slow-walking drugs and access and hiding and obfuscating those drugs which may be beneficial to people, how about the HHS now limiting the state of Texas' ability to receive monoclonal antibody treatment? I was on a conference call with HHS leadership saying, why are you cutting our supply in half? Monoclonal antibody treatments are working. I said, tell me what? Tell me. Give me the amount that is currently in inventory. Give me the amount that can be produced on a weekly or daily basis by the companies that can manufacture it, and then tell me what you believe the demand is and why you're standing in the way of the orders that we're putting in Texas to try to take care of our folks, or Florida, or any other state. They wouldn't and couldn't answer the question because it wasn't about the math. I pressed them. I asked a second question. Got back in queue on the whatever Zoom call, or I think it was an audio conference call. Got back in, I asked again. They wouldn't answer. Because it wasn't about the math. It wasn't about the numbers. It was about going after Texas and Florida and saying, you're not going to get monoclonal antibody treatments. The week of September 13th, 2021, Texas received 23,640 doses. This week, Texas is receiving 11,400 doses, more than a 51% decrease. There's no reason for the federal government to be standing in the way of a state being able to work with their doctors to meet demand, to save lives. The only reason is the power play of people who are absolutely so arrogantly full of their own views of the world that they want to press them upon the American people, as does Dr. Fauci, as does CDC Director Walensky, as do the leadership at the FDA, HHS generally. These are the health experts, by the way, who also endorse mass house arrests of Americans by locking down. The lockdowns, remember 15 days to slow the spread? What a joke. The lockdowns deteriorated people's mental health and inflicted more damage on women and girls. Among adolescents aged 12 to 17, the average number of visits to an emergency room for suspected suicide attempts was 22% higher during 2020 and 39% higher during the winter of 2021 than the corresponding periods a year before. During the last winter, emergency department visits for suspected suicide attempts were 50% higher. Reporting also shows more than 400,000 fewer child welfare concerns were reported. According to CDC data, overdose deaths killed a record number of Americans in 2020. Almost 100,000 in 2020. Don't get me started on the border. Don't get me started on fentanyl. Don't get me started on the incompetence of an administration that would allow people to get abused in the name of open borders, saying that they're somehow compassionate, while little girls get sold into the sex trafficking trade and fentanyl pours into our communities, into our lives of our loved ones and our young people who are dying by the thousands Don't get me started about the empowered cartels. Don't get me started about the ranches getting overrun, the people getting abused, the dead bodies of migrants in South Texas. It's all the same thing, and it's all the same power play by a federal government led by a president who wants to give lip service to doing something to help this country while playing woke politics and allowing the American people to get abused and harmed in the process. Just as we've seen unfold in Loudoun County when a little girl, a 9th grader, gets raped in a bathroom. The father, upset, goes to the school board meeting, and in the school board meeting dares to speak up and then is dragged down, bloodied, arrested because he was there to defend his little girl who got raped by a boy wearing a skirt in the bathroom of the high school he sent her to get educated. And then that school board, sweeping this all aside in the name of wokeness and politically correctness, then what do? They ignore it. And then he becomes the poster child for so-called domestic terrorism. And then what happens? Another little girl gets abused by the same boy at a different high school in that district, in Loudoun County, Virginia. Leftist wokeism running our schools with Virginia Democrats allowing it to happen. Because that's what's happening every single day in the Commonwealth of Virginia, in Loudoun County. This is the state of our country at the moment, bowing down to the altar of woke politics, of the power hungry, the elite who think they know what's best for you. The same people who walk in and say, parents don't have a role in the classroom, parents don't have a role in the schools, parents don't have a say of what's going to be decided in the school boards. And nothing could be more un-American. Nothing could be undermining the future of this country more than to separate parents from the education of their children. Nothing could do more damage to our country than undermining faith in institutions, because so-called medical professional experts are telling lies, distorting the truth, refusing to be humble, to come forward and say they don't know the answer, or to be honest about what taxpayer dollars are going to fund what kind of research in China. Having the slightest bit of humility to say, maybe we don't know all the answers. Maybe we should allow parents, doctors, families to make decisions that are in the best interest of their children, the best interest of themselves. Madam Speaker, how much time do I have remaining?
The gentleman has 2 minutes remaining.
I think the Speaker. Madam Speaker, we've got to make a decision about what we're going to do to carry this country forward. We've got to decide whether or not we're going to give people information that they can believe in and trust, and make sure that the institutions that are running this country or that are providing information for this country can be relied upon. The American people are waking up. The American people are waking up to the lies and the distortions that have been shoved into their faces by the media, by the schools, and by the very people that are supposed to be running our national health care institutions and providing information that you can rely upon. The American people are waking up, and they're taking back their country. And the response shouldn't be, as it was from the Attorney General of the United States, to send the FBI in to go after parents in school boards. The response shouldn't be to sweep aside the concerns of a mom who wants to teach and has MS and doesn't want to get a vaccine and then has to choose and might get fired. That should not be the response of a competent and respectful government. That should not be the response of a government that is limited in power and is supposed to derive its power from the consent of the governed. Madam Speaker, I yield back.